Corrections isn't just about prisons, it's about people. The people who do the time and the ones that are working there. It's about safer communities, about what happens when the gates close and what happens after they open. Approximately 95% of those who are incarcerated today will one day again be our neighbor. Yet almost half of those return to prison. Do we really want people to leave prison the same way they went in?
He is set for immediate release in exactly 23 months. So he's going to come home. He's going to come home uneducated, with no training, no rehabilitation.
Some might argue that what shapes an inmate's time the most isn't the sentence, but the people around them, especially those in uniform, those who work behind the walls, the officers, the staff, and the volunteers. But they face the weight of prison too.
The staff are happy, the offender population is happy, we can, just go in there and do our job and go home. But if one party or the other is not, content, you're gonna have issues.
Correctional officers have double the PTSD rates of that of military, and suicide rates double that of police. A life expectancy, 15 years less than the average person. It's easy to see that the traditional way of corrections in the U.S., it's outdated and fundamentally flawed. If prison is only about confinement, all we do is trap brokenness inside the walls. But if prison can become a place of transformation, it changes everything. It changes families. It changes communities. And it changes futures. And you're probably asking yourself, why does this matter to me? Well, growing up, I was that troubled kid in and out of the justice system and had multiple felonies as a teenager. Eventually, ended up in prison as an adult. It was after prison that I started life, began a successful business, and ended up founding the Fourth Purpose Foundation. Prisons in America continue to cost the taxpayers more, yet they rarely change the trajectory of those who go through it, and instead often cause more victims. For the last 2 decades, I've made it my mission to tackle this challenge because it matters to me. Across the country, there are pockets, correctional systems and leaders who are disrupting the status quo. It's these disruptive leaders who are choosing to innovate rather than stick to tradition. They're choosing compassion over indifference, growth over control. Not everyone agrees on what's working or even what corrections should look like. And what we discovered in Missouri may challenge what you think about prisons. This is a story about disruption, a system once known for high violence, low morale, and some of the highest recidivism rates in the country. Change wasn't just needed, it was way overdue.
Corrections officers say they are losing veteran-trusted colleagues every day.
I actually had to call a major and say, hey, I can't get anybody to stay. He goes, well, we can lock the doors and nobody can leave until they get relieved.
The environment that I walked into when I first started was a lot like the old school way. I came in at the very end of the ask, tell, make, where you'd ask someone to do something, you'd tell them to do something, and then you'd make them do what you wanted them to do. And that was kind of the way that we handled dealing with the residents, and that's also how our administration and our supervisors kind of dealt with us.
However, Farmington Corrections Supervisor Joni Light says she's constantly fighting pressure to put workers with no training out with offenders.
I'm being told to send my untrained staff in defensive tactics out into the wing. I'm not necessarily comfortable with that.
I was automatically placed in ADSEG, which is widely known as the worst place to work inside of a prison.
You might not want this on film.
I get greeted by my fellow CO1s and sergeant and told immediately that my name is Rookie and I'm to answer by it until they tell me otherwise.
Hance was working with a female officer in July 2017 when an inmate attacked from behind, stabbing her repeatedly. He says he's prohibited from getting into detail, but he can say that he was powerless.
If I had the training at that time, I would have been supposed to step in and help take care of the situation.
But you didn't have it at that time?
I did not.
It was very unheard of for you to go and speak to a senior supervisor. It was definitely unheard of for you to speak to any type of administrative staff, such as wardens or the major or anything like that. There was a specific individual that I would try to greet because I heard he was a very rash individual. I made it my goal every day to get him to at least say something to me. I worked with him for maybe about 6-7 months before he retired. I never met that goal. He would never acknowledge my existence. He would grunt whenever I would say good morning, Cap, or whatnot to him.
You've got to prove yourself to these people. That was the consensus. I'm not going to waste my time getting to know your name. You're going to be gone in less than a year.
Representative Tim Rimmel said, "When I heard the testimonies from employees from different areas of our state and correctional facilities, I was very disturbed at what we heard. To have these types of things happen are appalling in itself, but to see how it was handled was even more appalling."
I think the type of people that would give a black eye to the Department of Corrections would be those that come trying to impose power over someone else. It was just kind of my way or the highway. There was no two ways to do something. You did it exactly how it was laid out in front of you. If you deviated from that in any way, you were wrong.
It was an environment where the chain of command was not present.
We look like we doing something. Next time we gonna look like we doing something when you come.
Okay.
Deal.
I saw a major, maybe a year or two in, walk into my unit, and I didn't know who he was. He was accompanied by the warden. I had never seen him before. It just wasn't common. We'd see a lieutenant once a week or something like that, but they always seemed to have bigger and better things to do.
When you walk in as a brand new person, again, not real welcoming. For one, a lot of times for these individuals that are coming in, and for myself, walking into a prison is brand new. And then when everything is siloed and you're going in and you're trying to figure out, well, I don't understand why the individual in the uniform won't speak to me, but the individual that's wearing a polo will. And that's where things were really siloed, right, into each division. Back in the old days, we'd say, before anybody's gonna talk to you, bring you under your wing, you had to roll around in gravel first.
Many years ago in corrections, I think the mentality was just warehousing. I mean, the idea was to get through the day safe and make sure that everyone that was supposed to stay in stayed in. That was our goal. Every day you come in, you do the same thing. You work with the guys. Some people are really good at it, some people weren't, but we just got through the day.
We just made sure there was no blood on the floor and everyone went home at night.
It was a harsh environment. There was not a lot of help for our staff. You come in, you basically got put on a post, told to read the post orders. You didn't ask questions because people wouldn't answer your questions, and you learned on the go, and you learned from making mistakes, and some of the mistakes were costly.
There was really no mentorship or anything, no structure in place to teach people what they needed to know to continue to progress.
It was very toxic back then. The inmate portion of it wasn't very good either.
When staff is negative, toxic, indifferent, boy, at times made me lose faith in humanity.
I remember
Inmates would not come up to a senior supervisor or any kind of leadership and speak to them, especially about an issue that they're having. Most of the time that was responded with criticism, or the individual would get verbally berated for approaching them and asking them like it was some kind of form of blasphemy.
We're here because we harmed society in some way. That's why we came to prison. What I'm in prison for is being done, but because it's behind a wall and it's being happened to people that are incarcerated, it's a good thing, right? They're punishing us. We need punishing because we have victims, so they're gonna victimize us. You got guys that have victimless crimes. You got guys that have had multiple DUIs. You got guys that are there for criminal negligence, which means not intentional, but I'm seeing all this intentional crime happen, but because of the fact that it's happening behind the walls of a prison, it's good. That's good for society. That's corrections. It's just, you know, the prison I lived on is on No More Victims Road. I call it a victim factory.
I've been looking for leaders who have been bold enough to change what most people believe can't be changed. And that pursuit led me to Missouri to understand how one of the country's most broken systems started to shift.
It was like an organization that didn't really have somebody running the ship. They felt like nobody appreciated them. They were just there because it was a job and it was just kind of what they did. They were serving with the core functions of keeping people incarcerated and making sure that was happening properly. It was an organization that just didn't have a lot of heart and soul to it.
That's when I met Anne Precythe. Anne had been appointed the director of the Missouri Department of Corrections in 2017. I first met her at a leadership conference event that I was speaking at, and right away, I could tell she was different. She didn't just talk about reform. She carried herself like somebody who expected it, like somebody who was not afraid to challenge the status quo. Her and I stayed in touch, and eventually I invited her to Knoxville. I want to dig into her experience and learn how she chose to lead. Anne, thanks so much for making this happen. So I got to ask, what was it like going in to Missouri as the director? And what was the governor's expectations? What did he lay out asking you to accomplish?
Well, it all started with a phone call that I received when I was director for community corrections in North Carolina. And I shortly thereafter made a trip to St. Louis and sat down with the governor-elect. And I didn't think I needed to waste his time, so I just got right to it and said, look, I know my skill set, I know what my strengths are. What I need to know is, what is it that you need? And he clearly told me, I need somebody to take care of the people of the Department of Corrections. And I knew then that I was hooked, because that's my skill set, is taking care of people.
Well, it was funny when Director Precythe first came to the Senate for her gubernatorial appointment hearing. I was in the Senate at the time, and I asked her, what do you know about corrections? And she said, I don't know jack, was her answer to that. That's one of my favorite responses that I ever got from somebody. I said, well, at least she's honest, right? And what she was saying is that she doesn't need to know the intricacies of exactly what happens at a Department of Corrections as much as she wanted to know who the people were, how she stuck up for the employees that were putting their lives on the line every day, and what she wanted to move forward. And I challenged her. I said, there's a lot of nice people that work for corrections, but they've never had anybody who recognized the efforts that they did. So that's the challenge you have in front of you, Anne Precythe. And she understood what that meant.
When the governor appointed Anne Precythe as director in 2017, I think we'd hit rock bottom as a department. There was not a lot of hope. There was not a lot of happiness. There was instead a lot of toxicity and negativity.
There seemed like there was a lack of care for mental well-being of staff.
Right now, basically operating with everything hovering right around 40% short on custody.
So what I walked into was a department in survival mode. This was like nothing I'd ever seen before in my entire life. A group of overall 11,000 people that were exhausted, both mentally and physically. Call-ins were high, morale was in the gutter, people were working extraordinary amounts of overtime. Co-workers didn't trust leadership, they didn't trust each other. They had no relationship with the incarcerated population.
You know, you feel less than. I wouldn't even say it's like an animal. You're caged up, you're cooped up in this setting, and nobody seems to give a shit about anything that's going on. You know, you could drop dead on the floor and nobody would care. They'd scrape you up and keep going the way that they do things. Nobody cares. I'm all alone. I'm so alone. And I was in this warehouse with 440 people. I never felt so alone in my life.
It was sad, yet people continued to come to work day in and day out, a lot of them. Don't get me wrong, there were people who did an excellent job and were there for the right reasons. But overwhelmingly, people were very disgruntled. And I can't imagine working in an environment where you don't trust the people around you. There was no sense of purpose, there was no vision, there was no understanding of where we were going. Why do I come to work? What is it that I do? There was none of that.
You got somebody working in a housing unit who's worked 7/12s. They're tired and they're not getting back up because they're all so spread so thin. You have to hope the 1,500 people at this camp don't decide they don't want to be here anymore, because there wasn't much keeping you there if you didn't want to be there.
Why are people quitting?
I would say money is part of it, better jobs.
Help us recruit the people.
So what you're saying is you walked into a situation where morale's low, staff are frustrated, people aren't working well with each other. I guess everybody is just suffering?
Exactly. I know, as crazy as this sounds, I believe people should be happy when they come to work. I think it makes you a more productive employee. Even in a prison, in a correctional setting, I truly believe that people can be happy working in that kind of environment.
So, happy working in corrections. I mean, that's quite different. How did they respond to that? The thought that they could be happy at their job?
Honestly, I think a lot of people just kind of looked at me like I was just this lady from the South who didn't know what she was doing.
Can we cuss?
Yep.
Okay. The first impression that everybody had when they met Anne and when Anne got here was, oh shit. I just don't think they knew how to take her.
I had a lot of legislators just wish me luck. Didn't think there was anything we could do different. I had a lot of outside people just asking me, what are you doing here? You know, you really think you can do something different? Nobody had anything good to say about corrections. Not the legislature, not the governor's office, not even the staff had anything good to say. I knew I had my work cut out for me.
We all were unsure, but myself and a collection of staff were cautiously optimistic that we were gonna move this department in a different direction from where we were sitting at that time to something better.
I had to work with the team that was already there. My first big decision was to choose Matt Sturm as my deputy director. Matt was very knowledgeable about the practices that were incredibly important for the department. Legislative, budget, healthcare, all the important top issues. He was the task-oriented, gotta get it done kind of guy, and I was the visionary. And together we really made a really solid team.
This is what's leading this department, and we're sad for that. But we're also very excited about what we're doing, and I think Matt does a phenomenal job. He's really the pusher, the one that gets things done, and We work very closely together, and I'm extremely appreciative of the support that he does, and I would really like for you all to give him a huge round of applause because he's phenomenal.
What exuded from her was positivity, energy, hope, kind of this feeling of unwavering progress. This is something like I haven't seen before. This is going to be interesting, and this is going to be different.
What was your plan? I mean, how do you get started changing a culture that's so difficult? Well, I mean, what's the strategy?
I wish I could tell you I had a plan, but I had no plan. I just knew that I needed to learn what I didn't know. And the best way for me to do that was to start getting out and going to these prisons and seeing what the inside of the prison was like. Talk to staff, talk to the population, look, touch, feel the inside of these institutions. I had to get connected to staff. I needed them to know I was here for them, even though I didn't really know what that meant when I started. But it was the best way for me to start. And when I would go out, I didn't tell anybody I was going, not to gotcha anybody, but I just wanted to show up, and I wanted it to be real and authentic and genuine. Genuine for me and real for them. That was the best way that I could begin to learn, what is this culture everybody's telling me about?
What made this culture shift partly successful was her traveling everywhere and talking to everyone.
I'm Anne. Nice to meet you. What do you do?
I am the major's assistant.
Perfect.
Before Anne Precythe took over, it was kind of like a dog and pony show.
We need to check these cells to make sure that they've been properly cleaned. And some of them were special. If we have time, they want maintenance ask that we clean the cellar court.
When they were talking about director coming in, they would be announced weeks ahead of time, and then you went into the fury of polishing everything and lots of money being thrown out there.
To me, was when they were telling me, you know, it really made us feel like you didn't trust me when you put the staff back. And I was like, yeah, but wait a minute. Let me tell you from my perspective. How are you? I'm good, thank you. I'm Anne Precythe. You going to class?
Yeah.
Good.
Anne was notorious or famous for popping up at prisons on Sunday afternoons or Sunday evenings or Saturday mornings. She wanted to talk to folks that she couldn't see during the week.
How are you? We love to see people start in those important roles and then work your way up and keep working your way. OSAs are one of the most important people we have. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad you've stuck with us. I'm glad you've promoted to case manager. That's awesome.
So most of the time when a director shows up to a prison, it's a big production, announced ahead of time, big entourage, everybody's cleaning up before it happens. Yet you didn't tell them you were coming. You didn't make the big announcement. How did that go?
I told my executive team that I would be going to prisons. I didn't tell anybody when or where. My assistant knew, and that was it. I thought it was going to be a good thing to show up and connect with people, let them tell me about the policies, what's working, what's not working. Many of the staff were happy to see me, but it was also abundantly clear that there were a lot of veteran staff that were very skeptical.
During that time, at the beginning steps of this, she was at one of our prisons and was meeting with some higher-ranking custody officials.
Those men at that particular institution made it quite clear to me that they were not interested in anything that we were doing from central office. They felt that their prison was very unique and different from any other prison in the state of Missouri, and that they were the ones that ran the show. No one from central office did. And I remember there had been a brand new lieutenant promoted, and he was seated to my right, and I felt instantly that I could trust him. But the other men in that room, they were very rude. They were not pleased that they were having to take their time to sit down with the director. And I remember at the end of the conversation, one of them looked directly at me and said, "This ain't rainbows and unicorns."
They said right to her face, this is asinine, and so you can take this and head on down the road.
I never said a word to anybody about that meeting. I didn't think I needed to, but it was very clear to me that those individuals were not going to align to the vision that I had laid out for the department. Those men were not employed with us much longer after that. You can't improve a workplace and change a culture if your leadership is not aligned with the vision that you expect everyone else to be a part of.
That's kind of where we were at that time with high-level administrators. So you can imagine how they were managing the culture or the supervision of the people that work for them that are on their team when they're talking to the director of the department in that manner.
Rainbows and unicorns. To speak to a director that way, that just shows how difficult that culture was.
I received so many emails from staff, some encouraging, but most could have been very discouraging for a new director. I remember receiving one particular email from an individual who had horrible things to say about me and my leadership. And I remember reading it and thinking, this person doesn't even know me. But when you really drilled down into it, and I ended up having conversation with that individual, his frustration at me was really more about his treatment by his supervisors in the workplace. So you realize quickly it's nothing personal, but it sure can feel personal at first when you're reading things about you from people who don't even know you. Can you see all different parts of the grounds? Can you see housing units and all that?
The staff understand it. Some of them are a little saltier than others, especially fresh after something like that. But it doesn't take away from...
It's an assortment of people that are here.
It doesn't take away from what's happening in that unit at all.
That's right. Good. Thank you.
So in a system with thousands of staff, many prisons, where do you even start?
First, we knew we had to change the department. We knew we had to do different. One, we were inundated with feedback from residents here and staff saying, this needs to change, this is toxic. Employees were writing to their legislators.
And every one of them, none of them communicate.
We start over every time.
Yeah, so everybody's information is siloed in each department.
And the guy comes back to prison and you got all that same information, but
The governor at that time knew it needed change. They did a statewide survey, all state employees were surveyed, and our results were horrendous. As a matter of fact, Anne and I got called in to the consultant's office. They said, we want to go through these survey results with you, and we've really never quite seen anything like this in our entire life. Anne and I were like, well, that's good, right? That's a good thing. He went, no, we've been all over the planet. We've not seen results like this. You're in single digits in every category, despite a very high response rate. So this is a unique set of circumstances you have here. And it was kind of like good luck. We knew we had to chart a new course, but to be honest, we're corrections people. We know operations. We know how to manage the General Assembly, appropriations, public information, but it's a different thing when you're trying to turn an aircraft carrier in a pond from where it's pointing to another direction, that being the culture and the very way we operate.
We didn't know how to get started. If we did, we would have done it ourselves. But fortunately, we were put in touch with somebody who that was what he and his company did. That proved to be incredibly well-spent time and energy because he really helped us begin to think about what true transformation looks like.
I had a friend who did nothing but work with organizations, not mainly private sector, not public sector organizations, that really worked in what we call culture training or trying to establish what's happening within organizations and then figure out a way to have collectively the organization move forward together.
We got connected within corrections through the lieutenant governor, the current lieutenant governor. I think at that time he might have been the leader of the Senate. He was watching the new director get commissioned, and there was a question that was asked. And the question was, what was she going to do to fix corrections? Because it was broken in Missouri. And the first thing she said is that she said, well, we really have no culture, and that's where I have to start. So the lieutenant governor, who is a big proponent of staff and how do you set up Missourians for success, saw that opportunity to introduce me to the new director to see if there might be some synergies on how we could help her with her culture.
I've led businesses, I've built teams, and I know that when the frontline people are not heard or feel valued, it causes a really big challenge in the culture.
It does. And you know, when you think about corrections, safety is the first thing that comes to my mind. In most states, the Department of Corrections is the largest state agency. And if you have staff that don't trust the people around them, that don't feel seen or heard, their safety becomes more critical and more in jeopardy. When you think about changing the culture and running operations, those two things have to happen parallel. You can't just stop one and focus on the other. They have to run at the same time, and that can be a real challenge.
His approach was unlike the others. Quite frankly, a lot of the others were kind of a playbook. What do you do to fix this? So the first step was really information gathering.
And we sent the team in and just getting an understanding of what corrections was. We had no understanding, no line of sight of what corrections was. And so we needed to get a little bit of a baseline on how would we approach this, even if we think we can.
And so the site visits at least gave us a peek behind the curtain of an opportunity to earn the right to eventually, hopefully, be in front and work with these people.
We saw a lot of people who were in opposition, a lot of people who were challenged, and candidly, a lot of people who were in a very fixed mindset. They did not even realize that anything else was possible other than low staff, other than mandatory overtime, other than not being able to see their family. So they were just literally, that became their norm. And we always say you get comfortable with the pool you swim in. They literally just got comfortable with that, not realizing that there was anything else that was possible.
I hit peak appreciation for them when we were able to go around. And I remember I was walking in the yard in St. Joe, and I looked around at the ratio of staff to offender. And I was like, holy smokes. Like, people come in and do this every single day of their life. There's an opportunity here to make a really big difference and invest in these people for the work that they do.
They typically approach things the majority of the time from a negative stance. How they course correct people, how they provide feedback, how they make sure that everybody's in line and doing the things that they need to do. There was zero appreciation for people. It was always course correcting. There was no explanation of why. There was no shared experience. There was just, this is what I say, do it, and do it with a smile on your face. And that just did not resonate.
Chad and his team did an amazing job immersing themselves into the ranks within our corrections agency, all the way from correctional officers, probation parole officers, to captains, wardens, administration, and everything in between, and helped us learn early on that the people that we had in leadership positions were really the linchpin in the whole operation. We learned that we had to put the right people in the right seat, and it wasn't just at the top layer of administration, but it was at every supervisory level that we had, from the frontline supervisor to mid-level all the way to the top.
A lot of times in businesses, we take somebody who's a really good employee and we put them in a spot where that's not where their strengths are. Those are tough decisions sometimes, to go to somebody who's been in a certain position for a long time and say, look, we really like you, but we think your strength is better over here. People don't like change. But if you can show them why that strength is better somewhere else, and then they actually excel at their job, that's what happened in corrections. Anne, along with her team, and she has some great people around her, along with Chad Carden and his team, really went through that organization and said, let's find out where these people are and let's put them in the best place where they can succeed. And then everybody feels better when that happens. Putting the right people in place is probably the number one thing you can do to change the culture of an organization. And unfortunately for some, even though you've been there 20 years, you might not be that person. It might be the person that's only been there 5 years, but has a really good head on their shoulder and thinks the same way that we want them to think and has the same vision.
How are you today?
I'm all right, you?
Not too bad. Nice outside.
Yeah.
So leadership across the board saw that we were not about just doing the same old that we'd always done. They realized that the good old boy system was no longer intact, and that we really were focusing on hiring people who aligned with the vision and the mission that we had laid out for the department, improving lives for safer communities. But we needed people that could deliver that message to the rank and file in the manner in which we wanted them to deliver it.
People that aren't on board with the mission become a sore thumb when the culture really starts to change inside of a facility. And that's when you know you're really making some difference. People were given a choice. Anne famously said it, you're either on the train or you're not. The train's leaving the station. And so you had a choice to either get on the path, be a part of that statewide culture that we were trying to build, or stay behind.
So Josh, if you think about from the administrator of prisons to every warden in our institutions, that was about 110 positions. In 3 years, we changed 107. That sent the message to people that we were not about the same old. We were looking for the right people that could deliver the message for staff.
You got a break today? House.
Now I gotta go to the tower.
When I saw her removing staff, I was grateful for the intervention, which I hadn't seen prior. It seemed like nobody cared what was happening on the ground level or at the institutions. They just didn't want to hear about it. She interjected herself into the facilities and made changes that she saw fit. And I agreed with most of them. It gave me a little bit of hope for the department at the time.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times, and I would have never thought this in a million years, I'd walk around an institution that was short-staffed, people working 60 hours a week, and they would thank me because we moved on somebody who wouldn't come to work, and when they did, they were negative because they didn't want to be around them when they were there, and they were forcing them to work additional hours.
They were leaders, but more of old school style. They were more security-oriented rather than change-oriented.
When you talk about some of the people that have been there a long time, lots of tenure, people close to retirement, and then the new hires coming in, there were some that were extremely good leaders. They wrapped their arms around them. They really focused on what they would need to really make this a career for them. Depending on what direct report you got, dictated the experience that you would have. And so just because I got this direct report, I might now be in 2 weeks looking for another job. Where if I would have been lucky enough to get this direct report who's truly a leader, I now see this as a pathway to an entire career.
When one leader can make or break someone's experience on the job, you don't just have a staffing problem, you have a leadership problem. And in all of my years leading businesses, I've seen it over and over again. Culture rises and falls with leadership. Getting the right people in the right roles was just the beginning. If you want leaders to lead differently, you've got to develop them differently. You've got to give them the tools and a vision worth building towards.
We put 2,000 leaders through what we call foundation development, which is we gave them how can they approach their role, what are the basic skill sets that they could leverage to begin to create different working relationships with their people that would lead to better engagement, that would lead to more fulfillment, and giving them environments that, again, people enjoyed and wanted to come into.
The most important tool, I believe, that we gave our supervisors was how to value another employee. That was something in my 30+ years of working, whether it was state government or private, I had never heard of before. Because when you think about staff working in corrections, what goes on at their home doesn't stay in the parking lot when they go into work. And what they experience at work doesn't stay in the trunk of their car when they come home. So how you can help employees begin to think about the good they're doing in the workplace can help them be better family members when they're at home. So we have to be sensitive to the needs of the people who work in this environment, because what they see on a daily basis, most citizens will never encounter a day in their life.
Policy revision, there's going to be a new coordinator assigned here. You'll work with that coordinator, essentially.
Okay.
So you'll have a little bit more guidance and direction soon.
I hope so.
All right. Yeah. Until then, just do what you can. You know, find something you think is pertinent, just share it. And
supervisors set the tone for an organization, especially an organization with a, law enforcement, paramilitary sort of structure. And when supervisors historically were promoted by, it was just their turn. It was strictly a seniority-based promotion process. And it didn't acknowledge that there's different skill sets to being a supervisor. It didn't acknowledge that as you move up the supervisory chain, you need different skill sets. And I think the focus over the past few years, and the focus we hope to continue, is to promote people that can lead and manage and recognize that that's a skill set, but it's promoting based on your attitude, your approach, and your willingness to lead, more so than just the time you've had with the department.
Tenure is important, tenure is valuable, but tenure should not be the reason people are promoted. You really have to look at that individual and ask yourself, can they really lead a team? Can they support their staff? Most of our supervisors had never been taught how to value another individual. So we had to start there. We needed them to really see their team as people. So that was our starting point. And then once we were solid, then we began to layer on top of that.
Is that how the 5 pillars came about? I mean, is that what you put in place for the supervisors?
The 5 pillars weren't just theory. That was how we hired, trained, and held supervisors accountable for the work they did.
The 5 pillars we go by is you got to hire the right supervisors. You got to hire that person that has a shared vision, that understands what the culture in the department is supposed to look like. The second one is they may not be the technical expert, because let's face it, they may only have a couple years in. You got to make sure you get them a coach or a mentor, somebody they can rely on to give them the right answers when they need them. The third one, and I think it's probably the most important, is teach them to value and appreciate their staff. Appreciation is a force multiplier. If you tell people to go in a direction and they start moving that direction, you have to recognize them for it, because other people will see what you value as an organization. The fourth one, also very important, is teach them to have difficult conversations the right way. I mean, oftentimes when you sit down with a staff person, that difficult conversation can either A, move them in a great direction, teach them what you want out of them, and keep them as a part of your organization, or it can alienate them and push them out. So teaching our supervisors to have difficult conversations the right way is incredibly important, and I think something that we work on nonstop. And then the last one is, if you've had those difficult conversations, you've met with them and told them what you expect out of people, and they just can't get on board, you got to get them out of the organization. They'll do more damage if you leave them in.
So what you were building wasn't just like new training. mean, it was an entirely different mindset for somebody to come to work with. Is that how the Corrections Way got started?
The Corrections Way became our foundation. We couldn't just ask new supervisors to lead differently without equipping them with the tools that we wanted them to use.
The department has a culture, and we wanted to keep that integrity of the culture, but every facility had its own climate. And so we did that for probably the first 12 to 15 months, literally just exposing people to it, standing our ground, and letting people know that this is something that isn't going away. At the same time, Anne and her team were tackling it from their end, making it part of their strategy, making it part of the vision. They would communicate it. And so we literally hit them from both sides, where people began to see a couple things. One, this might not be just your typical flavor of the month. Two, I'm actually seeing some benefit, even if it's in pockets, by some of the things that how we're working together, how we're interacting, how we're communicating with each other, how we're creating clarity. And then three, because of those things, the scoreboard began to change. Small, but it began to change.
You deliver those, and then the final phase is a sustainment piece. So if you're really committed to changing the culture, you have to have this sustainment phase, and that's an ongoing, that's where the real commitment comes in.
So we had to get these influencers from the inside that would literally help drive us.
We pulled 25 people that Chad identified from across the state that could champion this and move it forward. We identified Corrections Way trainers inside of our organization to start teaching and training this. We wove it into our onboarding process. So when new staff came, they understand who we are, what we're about, and what we're about for our employees. We interwove it into our interview process. So if you are interviewing for a promotion and moving up the ladder, you should know the Corrections Way skills and what they are and how you use them.
The Corrections Way is our way of life. It's a foundation for how we conduct ourselves in every single interaction and how we build trust, respect, rapport, appreciate, listen, and value others. It's our blueprint. I oversee the Corrections Way team, which consists of 4 supervisory specialists and 3 training specialists. What we're really doing is keeping the momentum of the Corrections Way while creating new ideas, and then I help provide that guidance and leadership to the supervisory specialist and the training specialist in their role.
Change never comes easy. When you start shifting culture, redefining what leadership looks like, you're gonna face resistance. Some people lean in and others push back. It's just the reality. But if you want real transformation, you're gonna have to be willing to walk through the hardest parts too.
We encountered resistance, we encountered support, and we encountered people that said they supported it, but were actively resisting behind our backs and behind the scenes.
You do have people who have a closed mindset. They're happy, they're comfortable with the way that we're operating, the way that we were doing business. So when you introduce to them these ideas and these concepts and changing how we're leading people, it's a lot to take in. And changing a mindset is hard, especially when you've been in this field of corrections for a really long time. When we do get those that are resistant, I think the number one thing that you have to do is not immediately dismiss them, because I have seen people who are pushing back at first, but when you are patient and you can prove that the tools and the skills do work, some of them have come on board. They're like, you know what? This is a better way for me to work with people. But then if you have some who are just completely resistant, you know that they're not gonna get on board, you have to run with those who are gonna run. That's where you need to put your focus and energy, on those who do wanna continue to improve and continue to get better.
I had one example from an individual. He was a CO1. He had no desire to move up within the department, had been there for a really, really long time. And he said, you know, I don't usually talk to people until about 6 months in, because I'm not gonna waste my time if they're not gonna stay. And to me, that was such a huge, not red flag, but it started to make sense to me that that's part of the problem. We need to pour ourselves in to new hires. They're willing to raise their hand and come in and do this work. So I was so grateful that he shared that, because I know he wasn't the only one that had that feeling of, why put all my time into new people when in 6 months they're gonna be gone? Well, so what do we do those first 6 months to maybe make it a shift, that this isn't just a job, that person, this could have been a lifelong career for them.
We had a captain that pulled one of my team members aside, literally scared her a little bit, because pulled her aside and just said, I will do everything I can to make sure that nothing like this ever takes place. There's countless stories of that happened across the state. But what kept it going was Anne, Matt, her team, and some of the pockets of hope that we found inside the department.
The corrections way has been a change of life for me. Early on, I didn't know if I was going to stay with this organization. In around 2017, and we started working on the corrections way. We were focused on our people. We finally had a mission that I could understand of improving lives for safer communities. And I started to see that we had administration that cared.
When I go to sites and I see that the corrections way is flowing through and the culture has changed, I think that is very helpful for staff. It's helpful for the culture in the department when they know how to handle conflict effectively, when they know how to communicate, they know how to de-escalate, they know how to receive and give feedback effectively, then people like what they're doing and they like coming to work.
And when we got to doing all of those things, I thought, man, we are on the right path to bring this department forward, to bring it out of the Stone Ages as far as how we treat people and to tear down those silos. I seen a mission, I got to be a part of it in changing the culture of this department and making it a place where people want to come to work.
I think where we're at now versus where we were 4 years ago is like comparing apples to oranges. I mean, they're complete different worlds. This place was a lot less safe. It was a lot more dangerous. There was a lot more fights going on. There was a lot more emergency situations happening every day versus now there's more communication happening.
So yeah, the culture is taken some changes in my 27 plus years here. There's been some times when the culture is not favorable to have a feeling like, hey, I want to help people out. When I started, that definitely wasn't something I heard. I got here at the right time apparently, because I was able to see the negative sides of things and also see the positive changes we've made. And I feel like I've been able to be part of that.
People are starting to speak the same language. We have all these tools and skills in the corrections way, and maybe at the beginning when you asked, what's your style, or do you know your value premise, people had no clue maybe what you were talking about. They were a little confused, but now we do know the language. So that common language gives us common ground, and it's a great place for us to start building strong relationships because we can have a better understanding of each other. We can communicate better with each other. Another area that I have seen our department grow is people recognizing the value that they bring to their job in corrections, that their job is incredibly valuable. And because of their uniqueness and that unique piece they bring, they make it even that much more special and valuable to our department.
Through this, it's given me a lot of different ways to communicate better. Several years ago, I wasn't as good of a communicator, so when we were under the ask till make, it was just problem after problem after problem. You're leaving work exhausted every single day. Nowadays, I spend most of my days walking around, talking, having a good day, having meaningful conversations with people. I love that.
I'm going this way. Gardner's right here. He's going with me.
What we found over time as we began to invest in staff, they began to look at the population differently. I can give you an example. At Algoa, a case manager came up with an honor dorm and said, we're gonna do an honor dorm on steroids and we're not gonna staff it. We were short on staff, so if they picked out a certain set of criteria that the offender population could meet, this criteria would be so that they didn't have to staff the dorm 24/7.
So, honor dorms, it's just a general term for a housing unit that has less restrictions than other housing units, but You have offenders that want to be there and that help staff and don't get violations. Do you think we could have maybe a quiet time and they could maybe get up and maybe go to other cells, or they have a little movement without us, running down the hallways and telling them this or that? It's totally different than what we were all taught. But I said, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we can always stop it. That was one of the first incentives we offered.
I was completely freaked out. I was like, okay, wait, what? You are housing a dorm with offenders and no staff. We can't do this. So I brought them in. They did a presentation. The room was full of Algoa staff. And when I saw the major walked in that room and was fully supportive of that plan, I knew that group was onto something. They were totally unified in their approach, from the warden all the way down to all that staff that was in that room. And there was no way I could not let them proceed. And it was a really great adventure for them. And it's something I'm extremely proud of today.
Just before count, which is just before lunch, walk in there into the basement where they have their kitchenette. You'll see the happiest guys in the world because they're making their own food.
Really?
Yes.
Good.
The guys that are making lunch are the happiest guys
Good for
in
them.
the world.
It's all the little things that we take for granted. This is what it's supposed to be.
Isn't that awesome?
I mean, now they can cook a healthy meal. I mean, they can actually cook a meal. They can become independent. Work here.
Feels good.
It's a prison. You've done something wrong, you're in prison. Why should you get to do something special, or these groups, these programs, whatnot? But then now seeing it all happen, it does work. When you see the guys coming back in for a program like this, it does make you feel good because, there's a few you hope that actually do good. You think they're gonna do good, and you tell them, I think you're ready for the outside to go and do your thing, do your day by day. Don't go any faster than that. They came back, and you can see how well they're doing, how well they look, the way they're dressed, they're groomed. You can see that right there proves that, program will work. It may have struggled, talking about the honor dorm, and it's worked, and it has worked, and it's still working, and it's cool to see. I mean, we don't like these programs because they're in here because they did something wrong, but yet you want these guys to go out and become good citizens. Well, I think this will help them in doing that, becoming a good citizen, helping them realize what they need to do, what they should do, how they should do it. I mean, isn't that what we're looking for? They want them to succeed out there.
If you want a safer, more efficient department, it starts with hope. I experienced hopelessness all around me, and I can tell you that hopelessness is the most dangerous thing inside of a prison. And so without hope, there's no healing, there's no correcting, there's no rehabilitation. Do I know how to do that? I got some ideas, but I don't have the answers, but guys have to believe that they can get through it and come out of the other side better off. And that's what hope is inside of a prison. So
Anne filled me in on all kinds of creative programs that started to take shape, things I'd never heard of in other systems. That's what happens when you build a healthy culture. She wasn't just checking the boxes. She gave people room to lead, room to innovate, and to make a real difference.
My retention among officers is near the top in the state of Missouri now. My staffing's better than it has been since 2018. It causes change. Just the talk of what's going to happen in the future causes these things to happen. The culture just changes. Positive leadership. Do we have the things that go on that every other institution has? Administrative segregation? Absolutely. Do we take care of those things? Absolutely. But I don't have to spend my whole day focusing on 20% of my population. And that's kind of what we have done a lot in corrections. I choose to spend my day with the 80% and focus my energy and thoughts towards them. If your leaders do it, your staff will follow.
You cannot control every decision made in a Department of Corrections. It's too big. So that's why you have to put people in place that share your vision and can then turn around and figure out what does that look like at this particular institution.
And the results, the final phases of this journey in our time here prove that those things worked. The positive results continued just to elevate. And to this day, the word I get is that they're still moving up every quarter.
We created a strategic plan for the Department of Corrections, and it was very simple. Improving lives for safer communities. And you do it 3 ways. You make the workplace safer, you make the workforce better, and we work to reduce risk and recidivism. Every single task that every employee in the Department of Corrections does falls into one of those 3 categories. And if it doesn't, then we shouldn't be doing that.
Any significant organizational culture change will take decades likely. My goal will be to make sure that that continues to get pushed down the organization. It's with many of our frontline staff, but it's not everywhere. It's with many of our frontline supervisors, but it's not everywhere. And for this really to take hold, that's the level it needs to get to and to be sustained. And for everyone to look at this is how we do corrections.
How are you? Good, good, good. How you doing? I'm good.
Good to see you.
It's good.
Great. So what is your hope for Missouri DOC in the future?
Corrections is so unique. I hope that they continue to feel cared for, that they continue to feel seen, to feel heard.
Putting people first. That's what leadership has been to us. In Missouri, our economy is strong. Our democracy is strong. Our people are strong. And we can keep it that way if we continue to put people first.
That every governor's office will continue to think that they're a great department and that they've worked hard, and that every staff person wants to work hard for the right reason, and that they feel they're making a difference in the lives not only of their coworkers, but of the people they serve, which ultimately means they're making a difference in their community, and they're making a difference in their state, and they're making a difference in the nation. And really, at the end of the day, I just want them to be proud. I want them to be proud of the job they do. It's important work.
Crime plan has been put into action.
Within minutes of swearing in, Missouri's new governor, Mike Kehoe, signed an executive order commanding the Department of Corrections to assemble a board that will review and revise the state's parole rules. These rules have not been updated since 2017.
Safeguarding public safety while promoting successful reintegration and reducing criminal relapses.
Bye. Really good to see you. Take care. Keep being happy.
When we came to Missouri, we found a disruptor, somebody with no correctional experience, but a deep understanding of the importance of caring for the people who work there. Her success came because she challenged the status quo and put the right leaders in place who were aligned with the mission. Her journey wasn't easy. It took years of fighting resistance, replacing leaders who couldn't adapt, and developing new leaders to carry the vision forward. Witnessing the impact of this disruptive leader and the change she was able to create has been truly inspiring and a roadmap for others to follow. Today, Missouri looks completely different from when she started. The real test will be whether others can continue building on what she began. Only time will tell.